Hey YouTubers, it's Charlie. So, big emergency. There are 4 Game of Thrones spin-offs in development right now, so I'll try to explain what all that means and what they might be. I think that means Game of Thrones just won Star Wars Day unless there's some surprise trailer that's gonna drop. So new round of the Game of Thrones giveaway. Because this is such awesome news, all you have to do to enter is be a subscriber, leave a comment on this video. It's for one of the enhanced editions of the books. So the most important stuff, there are 4 separate spin-offs that are in development right now at the same time. George R.R. Martin is only personally involved with 2 of those. They've announced all the different people that are writing these ideas, but let's focus on the 2 that George R.R. Martin are attached to right now, and I'll explain the others too. Because what HBO is doing is it's taking the Star Wars story group approach to developing ideas. So when they're talking about Star Wars movies that they want to do, they don't talk about one movie at a time. They, Marvel, Warner Brothers, the big comic book movie studios, they develop several ideas all at the same time, all year round. There's always hundreds of ideas that never make it past the idea stage. But whatever HBO was considering for their spin-off, they've whittled it down to 4 that are being written. That doesn't mean that there's going to be 4 different Game of Thrones shows running at the same time. One of them will probably start the next season after Game of Thrones Season 8 ends. So if this is Season 7 this year, 2018, Season 8, then 2019 would probably be when the spin-off would start, depending on when they start production. But they just want to get the ball rolling, and there was a writer's strike that almost happened, which is probably why you're hearing about this right now. Otherwise, they probably would have sat on this news and just waited till way later to announce it. But what are the 2 shows that George R. R. Martin is working on? So there are 2 big anthology stories that he's written that they haven't touched in Game of Thrones yet. That's probably what he's attached to, because of all the Song of Ice and Fire material, he spent the most time with the actual stuff that he's been writing. So one is The Tales of Dunk and Egg. It's an anthology series that takes place a little less than 100 years before the events that are happening on the TV show right now. But it follows Aegon V, Egg, and Duncan the Tall. So you have Egg as in Aegon because he had a bald head. So his brothers called him Egg for short. You know that Maester Aemon up at the wall called his name before he died. He was one of Egg's brothers. That's how old Maester Aemon was. Dunk is Sir Duncan the Tall. He's an ancestor of Brienne of Tarth. That's why she's so tall, because he was huge, so that runs in her family. There are 3 books that Martin has already written as part of that series, and a 4th is planned. There's The Hedge Knight, The Sworn Sword, The Mystery Knight, and then the 4th one is called The She-Wolves of Winterfell, and he's not going to write that till after he's done with Winds of Winter, so it's not going to drop for a while. But those are novellas. They're not like full novels like the Song of Ice and Fire novels, so it's less material, but he spent a lot of time developing those characters. The other spin-off idea he might be attached to is the Dance of the Dragons conflict. It takes place before the events of Dunk and Egg, and it's basically a Targaryen civil war. Now, it's not the Blackfyre Rebellion, but it's a war of succession fought within the Targaryen family in a time when dragons proliferated. So if you're a big fan of dragons on Game of Thrones, that would be your spin-off. And I think they're trying to do a spin-off that feels familiar while at the same time being as different from the narrative that you're seeing right now. But there are a couple of other huge events that would be very popular that they could do. There's Robert's Rebellion, a really big event that they briefly touched on, but Dan and Dave have already created the framework for the events of that series. I don't think that George R. R. Martin would be developing that specifically. He's probably mostly working on the series that are very different than what they've done before. The thing that he's usually there for is to help them with the characters, so if they're doing unfamiliar characters the series hasn't already touched on, like young Ned Stark, young Robert Baratheon, young Lyanna Stark, that's where all these new writers would need the most help. So Robert's Rebellion is a really easy idea. You could even bring back some of the actors like Arthur Dayne, Eiling Franciosi to play Lyanna Stark, because she's about the right age, and it's a really interesting event, and you could call it Game of Thrones Rebellion. I think it's key that they keep the spin-off title as short as possible, and a really big idea in the world now, in real-world politics, is rebelling against oppressive leaders, so Game of Thrones Rebellion feels like a timely series, even though it's not that much different than stuff that we've seen before. But the other really key thing I think that's important for the spin-off that they do is they want to do something that people that aren't super familiar with the main series, maybe they haven't even watched a Game of Thrones episode before, could pick it up and run with it. So there are a lot of things as book readers that we know about big historical events that are way less familiar, and I think they want to keep it as familiar as possible, while at the same time being able to focus on different characters. So it's like, oh, you know, baby Jon Snow, we know him because we just spent the last 7 seasons watching him, but here's his mother, somebody that we only learned a little bit about. She's actually a really fascinating character by herself too. we'd be able to see Rhaegar Targaryen, another character that people have only talked about in cryptic ways. So the most exciting thing beyond that, obviously R plus L equals J, people will go crazy about that, but there's young Robert Baratheon. So you've seen the old man that's gone to see the terrible leader. Really, during season 1, he's a sad version of himself. You would get to see the warrior, the conquering Robert Baratheon, the badass, the one that everybody told to be king, even though they knew he was wildly unqualified. There are a couple other really big events that are super familiar, like Aegon's conquest. They could do a history of the Targaryen family centered on Aegon the Conqueror. So you could do the Doom of Valyria, you could do Daenerys the Dreamer and the story of how his family came to live at Dragonstone, then he conquered the Seven Kingdoms. You could stretch that out for 7 seasons. And I should have made this clear too, all these spin-off ideas would be like 70-hour ideas. So anytime they develop a big show like this, they want to make sure that it can run for 7 seasons. So this could change, but as far as they've explained, each of these 4 separate ideas would be full-blown series. There'd be 10 episodes a season, and there'd be at least 7 seasons. And because Game of Thrones is 10 times as popular as any other series that HBO has ever done, even if it's not as popular as the main series, anything they do could make it easily to 7 seasons. So beyond those really easy picks, those are the easy slam dunks that would also be very different from what's happening now, although Aegon's conquest does feel a little bit similar to Daenerys because there's so many parallels between her life and his life. But I just love the idea of them doing a Game of Thrones series where they just called it Game of Thrones Conquest. And whatever they do, it will probably be called Game of Thrones with a subtitle, Game of Thrones ... something. But what about that last pick? They're also probably considering a sequel series that would take place after what's happening on the show now, so that characters from the show that survived through season 8 could just come and guest star every once in a while, but they wouldn't have to be main characters. So I know that sounds kind of lame. It's the easiest thing that they could possibly do. It would just be set like a couple years after what's happening on the show now, and you would follow King Jon Snow if he survives season 8. We have to talk about theories of how the series is going to end, because if they do want to do a sequel series, it would probably have to be about one of the biggest characters right now. Like you've heard about all the actors earning crazy money for season 8. That's why I'm feeling that they probably won't do a sequel series, because they would have to do a big character who's already earning crazy money, and it would just destroy the show's budget. So I think they want to stick with familiar house names, so you have like House Stark, House Lannister, but there'll be new actors playing characters, and it's just easier to do that as a prequel series. They could do the origin of those great houses, which is set way back in the Age of Heroes, so it would be set a long time, like thousands and thousands of years before what's happening on the show right now. And thematically, it's usually important to tie them to a big event, like the Dance of the Dragons is this huge conflict within the Targaryen family. And if they're doing the War for the Dawn on the main series right now, what is the other really big event that people are already familiar with in history? So another really easy idea would be to start a series set as they're building the wall, which on the show would be about 1,000 years before what's happening right now, but in the books it's closer to 8,000 years. So you would actually see Bran the Builder, and you could also jump forward to the rise of the Valyrian Freehold. So I think what they want to do is they want to do a spin-off series that allows them to go to the east and travel around to a lot of familiar places. They don't want to just be stuck in Westeros or just stuck in the east. If you've read the books, you know that there's this grand history. They could do any number of events and it would be really cool. They could go to Asshai and do a series set over there that had nothing to do with what was going on in Westeros, and that would be badass. But you have to remember that TV is largely designed for the masses, so it's going to be something really cool that people that have not read the books and have no idea and maybe didn't even watch the first Game of Thrones series could watch and pick up easily. So I'm not expecting them to announce anything anytime soon. I was blown away that they revealed this soon. Hey, we have 4 spin-offs we're developing. One of them is actually going to turn into a TV show. But what'll happen is that even if they have other good ideas that they just feel like aren't the strongest, they'll put them on a shelf and they'll have their spin-off and they'll have their idea for whatever next spin-off is after that. So unless the world burns to the ground in the next 8 or 9 years, there will be another Game of Thrones spin-off after whatever's coming next. So just let me know in the comments, what do you want them to do and what do you want them to call it? Remember, it'll probably be called Game of Thrones, then ... subtitle, whatever it is. What's going to happen next is there was a Star Wars Last Jedi video that I postponed, and there's some Guardians of the Galaxy that I'll be posting. So I'll say congratulations to Rebecca L. You're the latest giveaway winner from last week. Please private message me on the back end of my channel so I can get your contact details. You can click here for my Arya preview. Ed Sheeran was talking about the scene that they share, and you can click here for more promo videos. Thank you so much for watching. Let's high five. I'll see you guys tonight.